Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Rudrikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Rudrikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantara srimadbhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayesha badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Yuttama Shloke and Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 5th day of August, 2020, in SanDiego, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order. Chapter 25, the descriptions of the characteristics of King Puranjan. Text number 19. Nanaranyamagavratar anabadhe munivratai ahutam manyate panto yatra kokalakujitai 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 nanaranyamagavratar anabadhe munivratai ahutam manyate panto yatra kokalakujitai. Glenn? Alex? Nanaranyamagavratai Padhe munivratai Manyate panto Kokalakujitai Nanaranyamagavratai anabadhe munivratai ahutam manyate panto yatra kokalakujitai. Ladies? Nanaranyamagavratai anabadhe munivratai ahutam manyate panto yatra kokalakujitai. Nana, various. Aranya, forest. Mriga, animals. Vratai, with groups. Anabadhe, in the matter of non-violence. Munivratai, like the great sages. Ahutam, as if invited. Manyate, thinks. Pantaha, passenger. Yatra, where. Kokila, of cuckoos. Kujitai, by the cooing. Translation. In such an atmosphere, even the animals of the forest became non-violent and non-envious like great sages. Consequently, the animals did not attack anyone. Over and above everything was the cooing of the cuckoos. Any passenger passing along that path was invited by that atmosphere to take rest in that nice garden. Purport. A peaceful family with wife and children is compared to the peaceful atmosphere of the forest. Children are compared to non-violent animals. Sometimes, however, wives and children are called swajanakya dasyu, burglars in the name of kinsmen. A man earns his livelihood with hard labor, but the result is that he is plundered by his wife and children, exactly as a person in a forest is attacked by some thieves and burglars who take his money. Nonetheless, in family life, the turmoil of wife and children appears to be like the cooing of the cuckoos in the garden of family life. Being invited by such an atmosphere, the person who is passing through such a blissful family life desires to have his family with him at all costs. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatammena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of the Sri Parampara. So we're continuing to hear about the Pura of Puranjan. Pura means city, like Puri. It's a city of 9 gates. And this particular verse describes the idyllic family life that one can experience in this city. We have peaceful family with wife and children, like the peaceful atmosphere of the forest. So this is the ideal. The material energy is inducing us. This is what Maya is all about. Maya means kind of a cheater, a trickster. And she's makes us forget what we really are, which is mortal, that everything is coming to an end, that it's all just a very temporary situation. And that, but in spite of that, we can enjoy within it. In other words, she gives certain inducements to enjoy. We've heard about sex life, and sex life leads to family life. And family life has so many wonderful things about it. You have the children, you have the relatives, you have the wife, of course, and the husband. And so it's we hear about this from Lord Rishabhdev, where he's describing Pungsa Striya Mituni Bhavanetan Tayo Mito Hridaya Grantamahu Atak Grihat Chaitra Sutapta Vitta Janasya Moho Yamahamameti. So man and woman, they're programmed. The whole thing is programmed so that there's attraction. There's attraction there. And when there's actual union, then the knots in the heart become very tight. The attraction becomes, very, very tight. And in a, halfway civilized society, you have marriage. Of course, that's also becoming Prabhupada says it's becoming an imagination society. And the statistics bear it out. That fewer people are getting married. They're just engaging in, relationships and then breaking up. But assuming that we're in the situation, just 100 years ago in America, that was the ideal. People would get married, and then you have oftentimes many more children than they have today in many situations. But that's the dream, is that we'll fall in love and we'll get married and we'll have children and live happily ever after. That's the real myth. But so it's describing here that sometimes the wives and children are called Svajanakya Dasyu, burglars in the name of kinsmen. So that's the other side of it. But the hope is, and the illusion is, that the children, and they bring so much happiness. I was fortunate enough to be in a family where my parents, were happy together. There was no threat of divorce. This is growing up in the 50s and 60s. I think it was much more common then. I think the divorce rate was probably a lot lower then. And so, it wasn't Shangri-La. It wasn't idyllic, but there was a sense of unity and happiness and growing up normally, in suburbs there of New York. So, but then, there was this threat, because at a very young age, I remember there was a question of making the rent. The rent at that time was like $86 a month. Imagine. Different dollars, dollars worth a lot more. But my father was worried, because he was between jobs. Because he was politically active, they were blackballing him. He couldn't get a good job. And, what happened was actually my mother started working. She was a teacher. She was a reading teacher, and she would bring people into the home and do remedial reading, and get a few dollars from them and like that. And then she actually got a job in a school. And so that was rare in those days where you had both parents working. I was a latchkey kid. I'd come home from school and I was, there was no one there. I went into the house. And but it's, it seemed like a tight little unit. There were no major crises. There were no, so. But as time goes on, the thing, it dissolves. And that part of your life is finished. And you start having new aspirations, and ideas for enjoyment. But here he's describing the standard thing, where you have the wife and the expansions and the children, and you think that I've got it made here. I've got all these people who depend on me, and I'm working hard, but they love me, and all this that. And that's what is this is after all an allegory describing what we call every man. In English, is that a person who represents the standard of material life. And so it's described in a kind of an ideal way. The children are nonviolent animals, and then you have even though there's turmoil in family life with the wife and children, it's like the cooing of cuckoos in the garden of family life, the garden of the garden. So being invited by such an atmosphere, the person who is passing through such a blissful family life desires to have his family with him at all costs, And this is a great illusion. I mean, you can see it's a very temporary situation. Eventually, I moved away, my brother moved away, went to school, and eventually my father got ill, and my mother had to take care of him for so many years, and then he passed away. And then my brother had to take care of my mother for many, many years. She passed away at age 96, And it was difficult at the end, obviously, I was able to get her to chant about half a round of japa with me, just about a week before she passed. Mom, it's time for japa. And by that time she was very submissive. She was in a hospice situation at home, in my brother's home. It was just me and her. He had gone to visit his sons. And so I said, she couldn't do the whole mantra, so I do it like Hare Krishna. And it was her pronunciation was perfect, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I said, well, this is the best I could do for her, I couldn't be there at the very end. I have a recording of it. Yeah, I recorded it. Just about a week. Yeah. A week or 10 days. But looking back, you can see how there was some, and I was a kid, grew up kind of normally, and there was ups and downs, but it was basically a happy home life. But it was all bound by time, Eventually it breaks up, and the whole thing kind of dissolves, and this is the nature of material energy, and that's why it's called asat. Asat means it's temporary, and the problem is that we ourselves are sat. We're eternal. We're eternal living beings. And we're always hankering. There's a memory in there. It's not distinct. But the idea of getting to a blissful place where time stops, where there's no past or future. In other words, the spiritual world. But we've lost connection with that. We've forgotten the whole thing, and we're living these dream lives one after another. And it's really like a nightmare, in many ways. The threefold miseries, and you have no proper direction, so you perform grossly sinful life, thinking it's just like normal. I like to remind. I was there when McDonald's started. I remember when they started back in 1960 or so, and I remember we would go bowling, and then suddenly there was this place that grew up. It was hamburgers. Oh, this is great. We can get a cheeseburger and fries before we go bowling or after we go bowling, every night. And it just became part of the atmosphere. Now it's 30 billion sold. How many people are they're oblivious. I mean, I live across from one now. And I go out to chant a little bit on the porch there, and people are lined up. Even with the COVID, you can't go in the store. I don't think they're open for in-house dining, but they're just oblivious. This is just what we do. We pick out our milkshake and our fries and a hamburger, and in we go. And so this is the nature of Maya. She makes you forget everything, so that you're more or less, blinkered vision. You're just living in the moment, or a little bit before, a little bit after, and trying to make it through this material world. And there are all of these inducements. This tour we're getting now of the city of nine gates, of the body, really, where he's living, and there's all of these inducements to enjoy. You got the five senses, and you have your imagination. You can create so many fantasies of how you're going to enjoy. And now with modern technology, you have unlimited, entertainments. You can see and lose yourself in this movie and that idea, and so many, and in that way, completely forget who you are. Even to forget you're the body. I mention this quite often. The more absorbing than the movies and the videos are the video games. The games have become so really realistic. See, we don't know in America, but in foreign countries, places like South Korea, Japan, the internet is much faster, much cheaper. China also, and they have the internet places where people go and they can play the game. And these poor kids get on there, and they go for hours and hours. They forget. They're so absorbed, and they're playing people all over the world, and fighting, and you're the hero, And sometimes they die at those consoles. I swear to God. Yes, they die. And the poor kid is falling over. His head's on the keyboard, and people next to him, they don't notice. Hours go by before finally someone comes in. It's happened more than once. Yes, and this is what does that mean? It means that Maya is so skilled, if you will, that she creates illusions that are even, they're beyond what you would ordinarily find in nature. I mean, imagine you're just an ordinary skinny kid, a nerd, and you're not a hero, and then you can take on this. They call them avatars, I believe, and suddenly you're a great hero. You're winning the girl, and it was perfect, and you're killing the enemy, and That's more attractive than your ordinary life, getting bullied by some guy, like that. Just stay right here, I can. This is the illusion. This is the Bhagavatam, in the modern form. The Paranjan, the city of enjoyment, which is the body, also includes the mind, and the mind can take you to a million different ways. So this is what we're up against, in trying to preach Krishna consciousness. The reality, which really is much more wonderful than the illusion. I mean, you read about the spiritual world and the wonderful interactions of Krishna and his many devotees. I was just reading the Nectar of Devotion, the varieties of just the friendship rasa, different kinds of friends or intimate friends, and everything is always ever fresh there. The problem here is that everything gets stale. You can go for some time, but eventually the mind and body just, need rest, and you need something new, or you like what you have, but it's ripped away from you. That's a horrible thing. And that's the nature of the material world. That's just how it is. Is that eventually something like COVID-19 comes up and changes the dynamic of everything. Every person in the world is aware of this, practically. Any adult anyway. And it's just changed everyone's perspective on life. In one sense, it's almost like, the Bhagavad Gita is being forced upon you. Janmam, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, Dukkha, Doshana, Darshana. Can't avoid it. You got to think about it. But most people don't know how to react, and so they just get into tremendous anxiety, fear, anger. Imagine the anger. You have parents now, faced with this impossible choice, sending their kids back to school or keeping them at home. If they keep them at home, then they can't go to work, and you can't pay the rent. If they send them to school, the kids have the danger of getting the COVID, and suffering themselves and bringing it back home. Why? Because our stupid leader, so-called, couldn't get it together to do what they did in Germany and New Zealand and all these other countries. You know how many deaths they had in Vietnam until just a couple of days ago? 0. They jumped on this thing and they had it all. And there's like 155,000 and counting in the United States. It's like worse than a third world country in terms of controlling this thing. So now the frustration, the anger, the anxiety of having children and are you going to put them in this danger or not? Are they going to have it together? Until a few months ago, maybe 6-8 months ago, he's leading a normal life. The kids going to camp, looking forward to going, taking to Disney World, and now suddenly it becomes a horror show. This is the material world. This is the material world. All of a sudden, all your dreams and your plans and what you think is usual is destroyed. It can be mostly on an individual level. Disease strikes, or financial calamity strikes, or any other things, any of the threefold miseries. So we're going to hear about that as time goes on. Now he's painting. Puranjan is enjoying, and now he's going to meet the girl, the beautiful girl in the forest. And that's the whole thing described there. So what's the point of it? Why is it included in the Bhagavatam? Well, remember the context. It's King Prachanabarishat. He's performing all these sacrifices, and he's not doing it so well, and so he's incurring a huge amount of sin. All these animals he's killed are waiting for him to get him. He doesn't know that until Narada tells him, but he himself is kind of, he's not happy about it, but he thinks this is the only way of elevation. He's an example, So Narada is coming to explain to him via this allegory that it's a no-win situation. Even if you did it perfectly, and you didn't have all these animals, waiting to get you, still, as Krishna says, Tetam bhuktva swargalokam vishalam chine punye matyalokam vishanti. That in the end, your punya is used up in heaven, and you come down to the world of death, and you just wasted a whole bunch of time. You didn't make 1 inch of advancement toward the real goal of life, which is breaking free of the bonds of material energy and going back to Godhead. So the Bhagavatam, is, many times you'll find this: don't waste any more time. Turnam yateta napateta namritya yavat. It's one of Prabhupada's favorite verses he would chant. It's very good for preaching. Labdvasu durlabhamidam bahusambhavante manusham artadamanityam apiha dhira. Turnam yateta napateta namritya yavat nikshaya saya vishaya kalasarva taksyat. Perfectly apt for these passages we're hearing now. So he says, my dear friend, you have attained this human form of life after many, many births coming up through the species. You've forgotten it all, but it's happened. Bahusambhavanti means many, many births. And manusham, human form. Artadam, it is the only form by which you can actually achieve the goal of your life. Often called svarta, swarta, the goal of the soul, because we may have many, external goals that really aren't just distractions. But here's artadam, but it's temporary like everybody, so time is wasting. Don't waste it. Anityam, so one has to be dhira. One has to be thoughtful, sober-minded. This word comes up practically at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita's instructions, right? Dehinos minyada dehe, komaram yobanamada, tatata dhiras tattanamuyati. Now, it's very important because forgive me, but this is my life. I've introduced how these editing changes have really given us, good guidance here. We had the self-realized soul is not bewildered by does it change. You know this verse that just as the soul passes through different stages in his body, from childhood, youth to old age, passes it to another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. I thought when I read that, he's talking about the person who's dying, right? That the self-realized is not bewildered, he's calm, and then he goes back to Godhead. No, he's talking about Arjuna, someone who is seeing this, should not be disturbed by such a change. You see, sober-minded, dhira. Dhira does not mean self-realized. It means thoughtful and sober-minded, and like that. And so that's what I think Krishna speaks this verse in the 11th canto. Dhira. one has to be sober-minded about his whole situation in human life, and think rationally about how I can best use the time at my disposal to achieve the greatest goal. Not vishaya, not the sense gratification, which he says at the end you've experienced in all these other births that you've had. So what should we do? Turnam. Turnam means immediately. What is that? Chakvat Turnam Ashesha Mandalapati. The six Goswamis, didn't say, well, that was very interesting. We met Lord Chaitanya. Let's consider what we should do. In the meantime, we'll just keep going on, working for the Shah. No. Immediately they were thinking, how can we get out of this entanglement? That's the immediate. So Turnam Yateta. Yateta means to strive. One has to strive. Either you're going to strive in the material energy and try to do, hard struggle for existence, or you're going to strive for perfection, self-realization. So, Turnam Yateta Namateta Namitya Nikshayasa. One should strive for the ultimate good, not these temporary flickering good, so-called goals of material life, which are just mirages. They're just, you think it's valuable, you go for it, and it's nothing there. It just ashes in your hands. And all of the efforts to attain wealth, fame, beauty, knowledge in this material world come to nothing. You leave your body and you leave all of that behind and you go, nowhere. So he says, Turnam yateta nabateta namitya. As long as you have not fallen down and died, as long as you still have your senses about you, in other words, you can do something, strive for nikshayas. And this word shreyas comes up again and again. Shreyas and preyas, the immediate good or the ultimate good. Because, and then he nails home the argument in the last phrase, Vishaya kalatarva saksya. In all these other bodies, you've experienced all kinds of varieties of vishaya, of sense gratification. Human, subhuman, superhuman, animal, plant. There's been some kind of, the plan is fulfilled, the sun is up and I'm getting, and I'm being watered, okay, my life is complete, and they're very rudimentary. Or some demigod, and you're enjoying with the Nandana gardens or whatever. But whatever it is, you've experienced it all already, and where did it get you? Another mortal body facing old age, disease, and death. You see? So he says, this is a call to action, like so many others. So this whole allegory is the motto or the result of it, the conclusion, is the same. The conclusion is King Prachana Bharshat, give up these horrible sacrifices you're performing. Don't try to go to heaven. Practice Krishna consciousness, like your glorious sons. The Prachetas who have already got on. They met Lord Shiva. They're chanting this mantra as a Krishna mantra, 30, 40 verses, in the water. It says they're standing in the water. Now, I guess it's understood they're standing underwater, but the wording is not exactly clear. But of course, that's the way they're presented. So, but then and eventually they see Vishnu and they come back. So it's a beautiful analogy here of the family life. Being invited by such an atmosphere, the person who is passing through such a blissful family desires to have his family with him at all costs. Well, how's that going to work? Family is, you're just coming together like bubbles in the ocean. It's described right at the beginning of the second canto. Deha patta kalatradi shatma sainisha sattvapi. The fallible soldiers, right? The body's the first one. Definitely fallible. I can attest to that. We all can. And the wife and the children, etc. The extended family, the bank balance. I mean, fallible means that they fail you eventually, isn't it? But even though you're seeing this for history, you don't have to be a learned sage to understand that all of this can easily be taken away from you, and eventually is. But pashyanapi na pashyati. This phrase is kind of a Sanskrit idiom. Although seeing, you don't see. Like someone, like a child comes into the, or say somehow a cat wanders in here. It's possible. I think we had a few birds flew. You remember that? So maybe they got a glimpse of these pictures. But what did it mean to them? Well, nothing to eat there, so let me keep flying. In other words, your consciousness affects how you see. And if you're not seeing with the eyes of Shastra, then you're blind to the reality, which is that this family life is just kind of a trap, you know. It's making me think that everything is okay. I'm in a wonderful garden here, and all my kids, I love the kids, you know, and everything. And it's like, in the old days we had Leave It to Beaver. Was it like there was a family, you know, the idyllic family, you know. It's just on the TV. It's not out of the TV. So where is that ideal family, you know, with Krishna? It actually is such a... The reason why we want that is because that's reality. And we're hankering for the reality. But like everything else, we're looking forward in the material energy and we will not find it. So therefore we need this knowledge. I've made this point before. How without the knowledge given by the Shastra, through the medium of the realized soul, you know, because these books were available, I have on my shelf a 2-volume set of the Bhagavatam. Yes. Printed by the Gita Press edition. All it is a translation and Devanagari. Takes 2 volumes to do the whole Bhagavatam with that. And I used it for my work when I was working on the 10th canto, 11th canto, 12th canto. As kind of a, when I was questioning the translation, I would check and double check, you know. And I got some ideas from there. But basically, you know, there's no way of reading that book and coming to the conclusion of surrendering to Krishna, chanting the holy name, you know, doing what Prabhupada. The same, Prabhupada would always talk about the Bhagavad Gita, how before he came, back in the 19th century, it was popular, right? Emerson and Thoreau and those writers, the transcendentalists. How did they find it out? Via England, which was in India, and it was bringing some of that out and translating it. But who became a devotee? I mean, I read the little Penguin paperback. You read it also, you know. But that didn't induce you to surrender to Krishna. It said Sarva Dharma Parityajya. There's so many other things in there, and it wasn't presented right. I had this experience in Philadelphia, I think I mentioned before, when Jayaweda Maharaj was working on revising the Gita, you know, fixing so many mistakes. He also had this academic Gita that he got. These books are sometimes $100 each because there's only a small number printed for a specific course or something, you know. So anyway, he had that book there, and I was, you know, working in the same in the Philadelphia house with him. So I would sometimes pick up and check it out. And so here's this Gita, written by some scholar, you know, Sanskrit scholar, you know, who studied, you know. And there was like one translation per page with a few notes. I don't know why they did that, but anyway. So, but you know, the translations themselves didn't have the kind of impact that Prabhupada's, because you know that you know, when it talks about yoga, Prabhupada would often talk about, you know, this Krishna consciousness or bhakti yoga, you know. What to speak of the commentary, which is essential. So no one comes away from that course or away from that book desiring to surrender to Krishna. You know, and Prabhupada made this point, there have been so many Bhagavad Gitas, but no one became a devotee till we printed Bhagavad Gita as it is, and especially the unabridged version. I remember once I was with Keshava Bharati Maharaj, and he told me how he became a devotee, and I think it was, you know, 73, probably. I think he was talking about the unabridged Gita, which came out in 72. So he was like many other young people there, you know, he was searching and he tried this and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you know, this yoga system and all this. And then he came across Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, and it was just like a revelation. He couldn't put it down. It took him like a few days. He spent all the waking hours that he possibly could reading that book. And when he finished the book, he just moved into the temple. It's so clear. In other words, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You know, Prabhupada is absolutely certain. If you're submissive to that or you're receptive to that, it convinces you. You don't read that anywhere else. Nobody else is sure. When you have some speculator or some scholar writing it, he's not, you know, realized Krishna. It doesn't. It comes through in the book. Doubt comes through. So we're so fortunate to have this allegory, to have the Bhagavatam translated. Prabhupada took so much effort, and to be able to glean the actual meaning of it. We're reading all these purports are coming, you know, from Prabhupada would refer to the commentators. And if I go in now by Devamrita Swami's efforts, he's prepared a Bhagavatam ebook, which it's available if one wants it. that has the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti for all the verses. And in the 10th canto, Vishwanath Chakravarti and Jiva Goswami, not Baladev, Baladev is for the Gita, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Jiva Goswami, and Sanatana Goswami for the 10th canto. I have it, And you can see, oftentimes you read Vishwanath Chakravarti, especially how, this is what Prabhupada picked up on in his commentary here, like that. But, Prabhupada, of course, adds his own realizations for so many things. But this explanation of what it means, as we each purport we're hearing, this means this means this, right? The animals of the forest became nonviolent. Okay, that refers to the little children and so forth. So that's coming from commentators, and so as we go along, we can unpack the allegory and understand. And then at the end, Narada will explain the whole thing also. So it's very clear. So this oftentimes, is so important. Like when we were kids, Aesop fables and things. A story is very enthralling, and it keeps your attention. And then it packs a punch, some kind of moral punch or instruction, and you remember that. That's the idea. And that's the reason why the Mahabharata was written. Because, Vyasadeva had written the Vedas, and the Danta Sutra, I think before Mahabharata. But then, he saw, these people, most of the people of the coming Kali age, they can't read that. They just don't have the mental facility. So I need to present something that will keep their attention, and there's nothing like stories. You read the Mahabharata, it's full of stories. We know the main plot, but there's so many other stories. And then, your attention is there, and you're reading, and then comes the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, and it's like injecting the actual philosophy, the essence of it. So we have so much facility, and by Prabhupada's efforts, and we should take advantage of it. And the lesson here is in other words, don't get entangled and enthralled by the promise of some idyllic happiness in the material world. It's just not there. It's a trick of Maya. Rather, become attached, become interested, and hear the reality, which are the descriptions of Krishna's pastimes and what's on the spiritual world, and how. And the method by which we can re-enter it and revive our place there. That's where we'll find, the loving, extended family that is really ideal for eternity. Okay, let me just read this translation again. Text 19. In such an atmosphere, even the animals of the forest became non-violent and non-envious like great sages. Consequently, the animals did not attack anyone. Over and above everything was the cooing of the cuckoos. Any passenger passing along that path was invited by that atmosphere to take rest in that nice garden. Sounds like fun. Yes, Vijay, please.
Thank you for a nice class.
Hare Krishna. Glory to Prabhupada.
Now, you mentioned that the Bachetas, they were standing under the water or in the water, so what?
Well, that's what I'm saying, I mean, I think it's in the water, under the water. Huh? It's painted that way.
Yeah.
And, but in several places it says they're standing in the water.
Well, that's a big difference.
It's a big difference, but I don't think that probably, was making that fine point. Oh, they're in the water. They're in the water means they're in the water. Under the water. I could try to research that to see what the commentators say. Yeah. I mean, it means in the water, under the water, and I think that this is. I'm not going to change it, but I may discuss it with my board of editors and reviewers. To think of this, because that's. They're definitely underwater, and then it's far out because Vishnu comes. First of all, no problem breathing, for 10,000 years. We're good. Huh? Sabramuni, And even Nanda Maharaj, he's taken underwater. You remember that he bathed at the wrong time in Dwadasi? Suddenly the representative, the sheriff, of Varuna comes, arrests him and brings him down. And he takes him down there. Huh? Yeah. And he's down there until Krishna rescues him. So no problem. So there's a way of breathing underwater. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mike. Oh, yes.
Thank you also for a nice class.
Hare Krishna, Prabhupada.
I had a question, see if I can get it out right, but okay, so Prabhupada often quoted that verse, no, that no one can understand me as I am, Atasha Krishna Namadi, by the blunt material senses.
Oh, yes,
and
yes.
I reveal myself to the devotees, being pleased with them for their transcendental loving service, right? So you were talking a bit about the translations. We have things like you mentioned, the Penguin Gita, or just Gitas where, it's just a very, this word means this and that. Then where we see, like in Prabhupada's writings, and as you're mentioning in the writings of the previous acharyas, there's so much more of a depth of meaning, which an ordinary scholar couldn't arrive at because, without... So is that the revelation that Krishna's sort of talking about that's being described in that verse? That the pure devotees, they're actually able to find the real depth of meaning.
Namadi?
Yeah. Like the Penguin Gita.
Because but what does it say? It says that with our present senses, our blunt senses, we can't understand or
the name, form,
or
quality,
perceive.
pastimes. Right.
But when we begin serving, especially with the tongue,
right.
With chanting and tasting prasad, then the senses become purified, and eventually Krishna reveals himself.
Right. So
that implies, the guidance of the acharya, because how are you going to engage those senses? That's the whole thing. Is do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. When to do it? In other words, that is the touch of the realized soul, the representative of Krishna, giving you the means by which you can properly engage the senses. So Krishna is pleased and he reveals himself. So that and you're talking about the mundane translations of versus realized translation, and of course you have the purports, which is so important. But even in the translations, so much is given that is different than just a book, a dictionary translation. Right. That's the thing. There's so many nuances of the language, just like in the water or on the water, or under the water. So. And Prabhupada, he would sometimes put in, it says yoga, and Prabhupada says, yes, Krishna consciousness, right in the translations of the Gita, so there would be no doubt about it, So that, and especially when you get to the purports, the faith and certainty and realization of the author comes out. And that's especially what enters the heart and makes you, consider or think that, this book is meant to transform my whole life. It's not something that I'm just reading and putting aside and going on to the Tibetan Book of the Dead and everything. We were just in those early days. But this is the book that can actually transform my life. And that's also true. We found in so many people, because we went from this to that, this to that, this to that. But if we were fortunate to come in touch with the devotees, and we got a really good experience with the chanting and everything, then we tend to come back. And Prabhupada was very wise, giving the prasadam. The prasadam often brings you back, even though, it's kind of interesting, I can take it or leave it, but I can't leave that prasadam. So let me go back. And eventually you become purified where you don't want to leave at all.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Any other question or comment? All right, got in with something sweet. And that is this verse about the holy name. Because I don't think you've heard it in a while, if ever. This is Raghunath Das Goswami writing about how he experiences Hare Krishna. Radheti nama navasundara siddhu mugdham Krishneti nama marorapata gada dugdham Sarvakshanam sudabhiraga himena ramyam kritva tadhaiva bibamera sanechudarte. An excellent fresh nectar drink with endless subtle tastes, such is the name of Radha, by whom all three worlds are graced. Condensed milk that is wonderfully delicious, thick and sweet, such is the name of Krishna, in whom all attractions meet. Now mix these drinks, O thirsty tongue, and add the fragrant, cooling spice of love, a prize the wise will try to buy at any price. And then at every moment drink this beverage most fine, and make my heart supremely blissful, peaceful, and divine. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.